Hello and welcome to Stop the Press on the 30th of March 2026. I'm Rob Chadwick and I'm a lecturer at Exeter College in journalism. I'm here with Bill Martin, who's 35 years in the business as an editor and sub-editor for national and local titles, and Nick Copson, who is 20 years in the business in marketing around all things newspapers. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, Rob.
Hello, Rob. Hello, Bill.
Hello, Nicholas.
And excitingly, we have a special guest here today, and that special guest is Pete Holdgate. Hello, Pete.
Hi, guys.
It's really good to have you here because otherwise I'd have to spend a full half hour talking to these two. So it's ideal. So we were talking quite a while back now about photojournalism and we were bringing our lack of expertise to it and saying things we liked particularly. And we, in that episode, said, what we really need to do is get a specialist in and talk about photojournalism and the art of it and all of that type of stuff that goes with it. So today's episode really is us getting the wealth of information and wisdom out of Pete that we don't have ourselves, and be able to sort of pitch photos that we've liked in our time to Pete and say, how did it go about? And basically all things the art of photojournalism. So I hope you're going to find it really interesting. Why don't we start, Pete? Can you tell us a potted history of your career? Would you mind?
Well, if you want to go back that far, I joined the Navy as a 15-year-old boy and continued my education in the Navy. And after my basic training, opted to apply for a photographic course. There were only 2 available each year, and I was lucky enough to get one of them. 18 months training at Lossiemouth in Scotland, and then off to join the fleet. And I served on Ark Royal in Hong Kong during the Vietnam War, and came back, joined the Commando Squadron, which gave me my first interface with the Royal Marines, and I thought that's where I wanted to go. So after about 10, 11 years in the Navy, I did my Green Beret course and joined Commando Forces.
Wow. All right. I'm kind of aware that this happens in the Navy because one of my old friends actually became a photographer in the Navy as well. I might bring him up later and see whether you knew him or not.
All right.
And then what happened? So
on joining Commando Force, you were expected to be part and parcel of the Royal Marines. And although I was still Navy, once you do your Green Hat course, you are expected to do everything the Royal Marines do. And so off I went for a jungle warfare course, Arctic warfare course, ski instructors course, and then just after that was the start of the Falklands War kicked off. And we started preparing for that, and we had basically 5 days to get ourselves together, get down to Portsmouth and join HMS Fearless and head south to the Falklands via Ascension Island.
I remember it very well. Obviously I was quite young at the time, but I do remember very well. Do you remember, Bill?
Yes, I do. Yeah, very well.
Not going to ask Nick, probably a bit young for it at that time.
I remember it being on telly.
Yeah. I was
Pete, in that
14.
situation, when you're going to the Falklands as a Royal Marine Commando photographer, is that your primary role, to take pictures?
My primary
Are you a Marine
role,
carrying a camera?
Yeah, my primary role is as a photographer.
To document.
But to document. And luckily, I was given a pretty wide brief. Brigadier wanted somebody to document the war from the Royal Marines' point of view. Bearing in mind, both the Navy and the Royal Marines had taken a hammering in various previous defence reviews. We'd lost 4-1 Commando just prior to us going down. We'd lost our amphibious ships, and the only 2 we had left were Fearless and Intrepid. And we had to use roll-on, roll-off ferries to get us down there. So it was a bit hectic, and so I saw my job as actually showing the rest of the world what the Royal Marines can do. Flexibility and ability to work in those adverse conditions.
And one of your most famous photos is one that a lot of people from that time will remember, just to interject into the history of things, and that was, Bill, you were showing us earlier?
Yeah, I think the picture's called the Yomper. It's the iconic photo of the Royal Marines.
Yeah. How did that come about, Pete?
Yeah, it was taken the day of the surrender, just prior to the surrender, in fact, which is ironic because when I went ashore with the idea of getting a picture of the Union flag flying in the Falklands to get it wired back to the UK. And I took a flag from Fearless, strapped to my back, and all packed up in plastic. And it was as heavy as my Bergen. It was massive. And we got it up on day one. Lads from 40 Commando hoisted it up, and I took the picture. We got it wired back to the UK, and Maggie Thatcher took that picture into the House of Commons that morning, saying the Union flag now flies over the Falkland Islands once again. I did get a bollocking for taking the
flag
picture.
off the ship.
No, for hoisting a flag and becoming the number one target in San Carlos, because it was a massive battle ensign, and so the Brigadier was not best pleased. So we chopped it down, and then I went to the various battles. I went to Goose Green with the Paras, and then joined 4-2 Commando on Mount Kent, and went on to the Battle of Mount Harriet. And then from Harriet, it became clear that 4-5 Commando were the next unit after taking Two Sisters, the Battle of Two Sisters. They were going to move on to Stanley to take Sapper Hill, which is the high ground just immediately outside Stanley. So we got ourselves over to 4-5 Commando, joined the Long Snake that as the unit progressed through various minefields. You take an awful lot of care in treading into each other's footsteps as you go through a minefield, obviously. And I looked behind me and I could see this chap had a Union flag, and because it was actually peeing down the rain and it was freezing cold, no wind, it was just hanging limply. And I thought it might make a picture. So I stepped out of the line, let them all walk past me, and then I dropped in behind him, and I followed him for about 2.5 hours. We went through 2 minefields, and as we hit the track down towards Moody Brook, we had Wireless Ridge to our left. We could see Stanley in the background smoking and burning, and there was this puff of wind, and it just filled the flag. I got the picture and ran forward, then dropped my large pack off on a vehicle, and then ran down to Stanley because I wanted to get pictures of first blokes getting into Stanley. Since then, we heard that the white flags had been hoisted in Stanley, and they had in fact surrendered. So myself and a guy called David Manelli and ran down to Stanley ahead of everybody else, and got a picture of people actually in Stanley for the first time. Unfortunately, we were beaten by Tommy Parra by a couple of hours, but I got the picture of the Brigadier actually coming into Stanley, smoking his pipe, and that was it. That was the end of the war.
Did you know when you'd taken that pic of the Yomper? Did you know you'd taken one of the great pictures?
No. I was glad. I was glad I got the picture. I knew the type of picture I wanted, but at the time it was just another picture I'd taken so many, ships being bombed, a picture of the battles. It was. But that picture was wired back when we got, let's say, as we got to Stanley, we got it wired back, and luckily it made nearly, I think, every front page in the UK press and most of the world press. So, yeah, it was quite pleasing.
I certainly remember it, without a doubt, yes. And a little bit of luck there as well, with the wind just at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just before they announced surrender. We just heard, just after that the Argentines had in fact surrendered. So, yeah, it was quite poignant.
Yeah, very much so. So,
is that a key ingredient for great photojournalism? Luck.
Luck, absolutely. I would say it's 99.9% luck. It's getting yourself, obviously.
I knew it.
Bill always said, we always had a bit of banter on the news desk and picture desk, you know, and about pictures and words. But yeah, I think it's getting yourself in the position in the first place. That's key, and then that's a huge slice of luck.
yeah, we were saying the guy who got the picture of Andrew slumped down in the car definitely had a little bit of luck in that moment.
Absolutely,
as well.
Because a lot of the pictures you take through glass, it's all reflection, but to get that picture with that expression, he must have thought all his Christmases had come at once.
Yeah, indeed. So what was next for you, Pete? You worked in the forces until...
Yeah, I saw my time out with the Royal Marines, and then did my last 18 months with the Royal Navy at Devonport, running the photographic department in HMS Drake. And then I started my own business, and which I ran for 2 years. But I found myself doing more and more work for local media, the Herald, the Morning News.
Was that a freelance basis?
On a freelance basis, yeah. So they realised how much money I was making as a freelance, and so they offered me a staff job. Because at the time my son was off to university, I just needed a steady job, because, you know, as with all freelance jobs, it's feast or famine. You either run off your feet or you sit around twiddling your thumbs. Mm-hmm. So I took the staff job and met Bill, and had 20 years, or just under 20 years, at the Morning News and Herald.
Well, there you go. And Bill, what made you at that point think, right, we definitely need to take Pete on? We've got to move things forward.
Well, he was there just before me.
Okay,
but it was I mean, we are talking in the last great heydays of the regional press. That was when they were pretty much at the peak of their powers in terms of circulation. Our staff numbers were ridiculous, and when I first came to Plymouth, you know, there was a legion of freelance photographers who were making decent amounts of money out of our 3 titles. It was then, wasn't it? Because we had the free as well.
Yeah.
And that was a key part of Pete's job, wasn't it? Was to build a photographic unit so that we had our own photographers working on with our reporters to our agenda, and we were reducing that freelance bill, which had become sizable. I mean, really sizable back then, and people know that better than me. That was all part of the project, to have our own team, and I think, Pete would certainly say he had one of the great photographic teams for certainly a few years. And, when you're an editor, have your own squad of photographers, and that's what it was, and deciding what to do with them every day. In a place, let's not face it, it's not a massive city, Plymouth.
No, indeed.
And what would we have had, Pete? 8 to 10 photographers?
Yeah, we had eight staffs, and I think
to deploy, obviously on a 7-day-a-week rota. Obviously, every Saturday, there was lots of football. I think we used to send 2 people to Argyle, didn't we? And other grounds and
Albion.
that sort of stuff. But
I remember you used to have pictures of pub football in there.
Yeah, that was...
I was in there a couple of times.
It was a job every photographer tried to avoid, because they all wanted their names in the paper.
Yeah.
So to recognise young Johnny. So what we used to do was line these little guys up, photograph them front on, and get them turn around so we could see the numbers on their backs. And then you had to spend hours every Saturday night putting names to the pictures of these little chaps playing football or Sunday or whatever. Yeah, not not our favourite task.
It'd make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And if you can think of it, and this is why I always get quite defensive of the press while you two are slagging it off, is that in the effort that people go to, and certainly that we used to go to in the regions, to make sure that if you did have a picture of, little Johnny Smith playing for Hamilton under 13s or something like that, it said that in the caption.
Yeah.
Because it's so much more powerful than just a kid.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course it is, yeah.
And for the family,
Yeah.
if you're buying, as people did, 20 copies of the paper that day. So, the effort that went into, local football, was it DJM, and
well, that was the kids, but you used to come to P&D games. You used to come to like adult pub football. I couldn't believe that. The first time we ended up in the paper, I was going, I didn't even see a photographer. That's amazing.
No.
It was extraordinary, the coverage that you gave to everything in terms of that stuff. It was just brilliant. But you can understand why you become part of the community at that point, don't you? That's all about establishing that community ethos, isn't it?
It goes a long way as well. It goes a long way to get the local communities to accept photographers. And the photographers became well known in the various areas of Plymouth, and... people say hello to you, and it was quite rewarding.
Yeah,
it used to be a thing as well. Once a year, when the Lord Mayor handed over the ridiculous chain of office that they have, we would present a year's worth of pictures in a
oh right, okay,
like in a folder, because it was just a matter of course. You'd never see a photographer at those events now,
right?
Opening of. The opening of an envelope, we used to call it. The Lord Mayor's turning up to the opening of an envelope. The Herald would be there, we'd take a picture of it, and we would record that Mayor's whole year, not on their behalf, we were doing it anyway, as a matter of public record. And I think that's one of the things that's really been lost in the last 2 to 3 decades, is that sort of public record journalism that only local papers do. It just doesn't really exist anymore.
Talking of local record journalism, local record taking photographs, it must have been a massive gear shift in terms of war photography, forces photography, naval photography, Marines, into kind of local news.
Yeah.
How did you find that transition?
I think that's the way I dealt with most things in life, because you see some pretty horrific things, and you box it off. That's the way I personally have dealt with it, is I box it off, I move on, and I throw everything into what I'm doing now. And that's to hark back and go to reunions and things like that, worst thing you can do. You've got to forget, what you've seen and what you've done. Remember it, but, in the right way. But when you're in your new job, throw yourself into your new job.
But you found taking photos of the local village fetes as rewarding as being in the Falklands?
Possibly not, but there are things that are equally rewarding when people say to you, "Oh, that was a great picture you took of, of somebody doing something in the local community." Whether it's pigeon racing, football, all the local sport.
Do you have a photo from those years, one that really stands out to you, or a couple that really stand out that you think, that was a great moment in terms of photography for the Herald?
Oh, for the Herald?
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be the picture editor at a time where I had some outstanding photographers working for me. The Wayne Perrys, the John Allens, the two Lucys, Lucy Duval and Lucy Blake. And every week, they would come up with an image. We used to have a page 3 pick that they all used to vie for, and because it was a show page, that used to be a picture that.
That was bragging rights amongst the photographers.
Yeah, and if you can engender that sort of competition within your team, I think you're halfway there. And because we were lucky enough to have such an accomplished team, the bar was set fairly high.
It was because of the quality of their work that we created the page 3 pick slot, which was because we nearly always had the room there. You'd use a picture much bigger. And it would be other than the front page, and the front page picture could, easily be what we'd call a smudge. You might have
a fire.
shot someone, fire, or a picture taken through the window of a court van or something like that. All that sort of stuff we used to get up to. But the
I've often thought, do you actually get anything when you put your camera like that into one of those court
9
vans?
times out of 10, no.
But that's the whole point. That's the whole point of the Prince Andrew picture.
That Prince Andrew
because he
picture,
did.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's the first one I've ever seen. That's
with that clarity, amount of clarity, and of course the expression on his face.
Yeah.
Because normally, if somebody's in a prison van, they're hunched up and they're cowed, and there's no expression because they're locked in a little cubicle. But to have that picture taken in the back seat of a car, cowering, the way he was, and no, it's classic.
Excellent.
I remember saying to my partner at the time, I said, "He's made it, that chap's."
What is his name?
As soon as I saw the picture, the first time I saw it, and of course, within a couple of hours, it was everywhere, social media, on every channel,
Memes are plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Bill, I interrupted. Sorry, you were telling us about page 3 in the Herald.
Oh, that was the point. So it was, the importance of photography we recognised because of the quality of the photographers we had. So we created spots for them in the paper. So we, specifically made page 3 centre spreads, whatever we decided, so we could use pictures well, because we had a lot of them at the time, and we were able to use them well.
Yeah,
I don't think that's a luxury that's afforded to editors today.
I'll bet. Yeah, no, everything's very quick and cheap, I would imagine, today.
I think most pictures are taken on mobile phones.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Certainly in the regions.
Mind you can get good quality on a mobile phone, yeah, nowadays.
Yeah, you can get, it's never going to fail, a phone, is it?
No.
Because it does everything for you, But when you're, say, sat on the touchline at Plymouth Argyle with mediocre lights, and you're trying to, get some good action pictures for the sports special on Monday. It can be.
You need a proper long lens.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need proper equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funnily enough, actually, I was. My students were on the telly the other day. We had a bit of a launch for a thing they've been working on for the fire service up in Exeter, and they filmed the whole article for ITV on the mobile phone. Amazingly enough, it's like it just feels like they just send them out with phones and a tripod nowadays. Really.
Well, one of I think, is it Danny Bohr, the film director? One of his recent films was done on iPhones.
Yeah, and Spike Lee used
they
iPad
had some
for
intensive
of his.
lenses attached to them, by the way. It wasn't just that. They had lenses there. But essentially the filming was done on that.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? Technology these days. Yeah. These kids don't know they're born, do
No,
they?
they don't. I can remember when, for an embuggerance factor, our chief photographer used to send us out, when I was a junior photographer in the Navy, he used to send us out with a wooden Watson stand camera with glass plates.
My word.
And and if you didn't get it right, you had to hump it all the way out again to wherever you'd taken it and do it again.
Oh, my goodness. That's amazing.
Whereas now, digitally, you can check whether you've got the image, and if not, do it again.
Yeah, when I first worked in radio, I had a Euro, I think it was called, with reel-to-reel on it to record it on, and you took it back and used the splicing thing with little bits of chalk on it and stuff. And I carried on teaching with that for a good 5-10 years, because I still think you're a better editor once you've done that than you are if you just use digital all the time.
Yeah.
It's much the same concept, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
So, Pete, greatest photos of all time. What are the things that you look at as great photojournalism? The photos from the past where you thought, I really admire that stuff. Is there a photographer, someone like Don McCullum or someone like that? Or
there's as far as photographs I remember a lot of war photographs. The picture from the Spanish Civil War, the guy being shot in the back, and of course the Vietnam War picture of the little girl coming along the road from Da Nang with.
Still a really disturbing photograph.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anything with children in is disturbing, and we saw a lot of that in Northern Ireland. Children being injured and maimed. And so when you think of what's going on now in, say, Gaza and Beirut, just imagery, but it's still, I think, a lot of the imagery, as far as public consumption is concerned, is cleaned up. We don't see the horrors that photographers see.
We probably just can't handle it, really, can we? As a populace,
at best, it's always blurred out, and but the guys who are actually filming it and taking pictures, they actually see it, and it does upset you.
I'll bet it does. Yeah, I'll bet it does. Have we got some photos we'd like to talk about?
We have.
Go on, Nick. You go. Sorry to not have involved you very much so far.
Photography is not my specialist subject. Okay. But I assumed that you two would come with some hard, heavy news, so I went with sport.
Oh, so have I actually.
Oh, did you?
We'll leave the hard, heavy news to Bill.
So I've chosen some photographs I remember from the time, but
okay.
Mostly I remember the event from the time, and therefore the photograph then resonates afterwards. But the first one I chose was. And this obviously lends itself better to YouTube, this podcast episode, clearly.
If only we were filming it. Describe the photo. Show us the photo and describe it.
I've got a picture of you, gentlemen, of course, which is Diego Maradona at the 19...
The Hand of God?
No, the 82 World Cup against Belgium, which at the time, Maradona was the hottest thing in football, 82. He was even hotter in 86, of course.
And it's him basically with 6 defenders looking confused.
Yeah, no, and I've read about this because it actually looks like he's taken on 6 defenders at once, which is more than believable, by the way, for Maradona, of course. The reality of that was that it was there was a free kick and they all dispersed at that exact moment, and he went to do some kind of shot. But the reason why it was interesting for me as well is because that sort of picture wouldn't resonate at all now because there's so much coverage of sport. Clips, YouTube, TikTok, all that sort of stuff. But at the time...
Well, that's also not a great picture.
No, it's not a great picture, but it captures the essence of what Maradona was about in terms of his ability to just take on players.
Yeah.
And the point I was going to make is that at the time, you hadn't really seen Maradona. You'd heard about him. It was a round the playground discussion. Have you heard about Maradona? But you'd barely seen any clips. But that picture came to light, and it's like, oh my God, he takes on 6 players at once.
But that get that, and that is one of the big changes in our lives.
Correct, exactly.
Is that, I can remember, as you both know, my sport is cricket, and you growing up as a young person, you had never seen, Dilip Vensarkar or Viv Richards or Joe Garner, these people from Lanzafar. Whereas now they're in our lives all the time, aren't we? International sportsmen in our lives all the time. So yeah, but I don't think that's not the iconic picture of Maradona.
No, there's better ones. But in terms of
the one of him cheating,
But going back to your point about
allegedly,
luck,
I suppose that's the iconic one in England. Is it the iconic one in Argentina or the rest of the world? And I suppose that's one of the things about a photo, that it needs the context of the place it's being taken and the place it's being put in the paper.
Absolutely.
True.
I would imagine it's not the iconic photo of Maradona in Napoli, for instance, where, he took them to the title for the first time for years and years and years. I have this one, which I think really summarises the moment you score the winning goal in the World Cup.
82 World Cup, wasn't it?
Yeah, the 82 World Cup final. And that's like Tardelli running away from putting it in the back of the net and just not really knowing what to do with himself, and like just the raw emotion of being the goal scorer in the World Cup final. And I've always loved that moment as a photograph. Yeah. I just think it's phenomenal. It really summarises football for me. It's like something about that photo says, always, just looking at it, it makes my head stand on end, just feeling like this is what football's all about.
Crucially, before celebrations became like an art form, that was just raw emotion, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't know what to do, I'm just going to celebrate.
Yeah, in fact, it's almost part of it that it is from the 80s, because if it was the 90s or definitely 2000s onwards, it would be something choreographed and a bit rubbish.
Yeah. I think there's a similar one of Sevi Ballesteros. Yeah, exactly, which also captures that moment of
for the listeners. I've just gone like this with my finger set towards, because what Bill's talking about is where he does this towards the camera and stuff.
Okay, my first one is that one.
Princess Diana sat in front of the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Iconic.
What do you think of that, Pete, as a photo?
I think her press team did the amazing job there, because it actually
staged.
Yeah, absolutely staged. But it got over the message that she was on her own, and
she was looking to kind of garner some sympathy at the time, wasn't she?
I think so. But she deserves, I think, all the sympathy. I'm not going to go down that road, because I could say
you've just gone down it.
No.
I mean, I mean, whether she deserves it or not is almost irrelevant. The press team and her were thinking, we need to re-image you in this relationship. And we need to show something here, and this is an opportunity.
Yeah, and it is. I think one of the most iconic pictures of her.
Yeah,
at that time, of what she was going through.
Yeah. Got anything more? Is that Maggie on a tank?
Pete will love this.
Maggie on a tank.
Oh.
Where was that taken?
That was.
I think it was on Salisbury Plain, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was several of Maggie with the Forces.
You didn't take that, did you?
No. No. As far as Margaret Thatcher was concerned, I think you'll find, by and large, she was not necessarily revered, but she was certainly respected by most servicemen, because they saw in her a leader that had the balls to say, do this, do that, and back them up, whereas I think that's sadly lacking at the moment. But as far as Maggie Thatcher was concerned, she made a point of visiting units. After the Iran embassy siege, she went and visited the 22 SAS regiment at Hereford and had a picture taken with the guys there, which again is quite famous. And she made a point of visiting the troops, and everybody respected her and welcomed her. I don't think that would be the case.
I remember that being the case.
With the present incumbent.
Yeah, I remember that being the case. I remember because I'd moved to Plymouth in sort of '88, so I started working in bars around the Barbican. I do remember the service people loved Thatcher, without a doubt.
They loved Diana as well.
Yeah.
She came down to Plymouth when we were to one of the ships in Plymouth, and she was great, and she would help the photographers out. If a photographer asked her to do something, she would, help them out, where a lot of royals probably wouldn't.
Yeah, understandably so nowadays, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a different attitude towards press photographers now, that you wouldn't get that cooperation from people nowadays because they're too wary of being caught out?
I think, yeah.
I guess I'm saying, do you think your job would be a bit more difficult these days?
It is difficult. It was difficult then. I remember when for example, when Diana was killed, and we sent photographers out into Plymouth to vox pop people. And I remember one of my photographers, Wayne Perry, was chased down Mutley Plain because he was a photographer. And they blamed photographers for the death of Diana. And, he came back quite shaken up.
I suppose that was a time where there was a bit of press where things were not being reported as you'd have liked. So things like Hillsborough had been reported at much the same sort of time, hadn't it? Or maybe maybe I'm getting my dates slightly wrong, but I think it was about the same sort of time.
There was a certain amount of mistrust, wasn't there?
Yeah, which had been building.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's because, again, that's where mobile phones have changed, people's perception of it and how comfortable people are being photographed now. And now people take pictures of everything, don't they? I can remember being a reporter and turning up to a house fire, and the photographer you'd be with would invariably, have probably 2 cameras on him. One of them would have a massive lens, and it was intrusive, and people didn't like it.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you got a photographer pointing a camera at you.
Yeah.
It was different.
It was the world's worst job. Going to, say, a survivor's house, survivors of either a car crash or whatever, something as maybe some misfortunate accident, and we were expected to door knock that person, and get a response. It was not.
That's horrendous.
It is horrendous, and
and it's no wonder you're not welcomed with open arms.
No.
Well, sometimes you were, sometimes you weren't.
Yeah.
It all depended.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd knock on the door and people would say, "Oh, I've been waiting for you. Oh, the Herald are here, George or whatever. Oh, when you come." They're almost waiting for their turn to tell their story, or other times it was,
Get away.
Yeah, door slammed in your face.
Do you think photographers suffered because of the paparazzi as well?
Yeah.
Got lumped in with the same brush.
Absolutely. And of course, they're 2 completely different animals. Paparazzi are photographing people they don't know, have got no connection with, whereas your local photographers know the people, they know the community, and they are connected to that community. But the public would not differentiate one from the other.
No. I've got a photo which I thought I should bring up, and that's this one from 9/11, which is the photo of the falling man.
Yeah.
It's a very famous photo.
Yeah, I was going to bring that.
That's that felt and still feels like really intruding on a moment that we probably shouldn't be part of, but yet somehow we need to know about.
Yeah.
And that's the job of that cameraman in essence, isn't it?
Yeah. I was picture editor at the Herald at the time, and Bill and I took a different viewpoint. I thought the picture, in fact, we used it on the back of the pull-out, the supplement. It is massively strong image, but it makes people think of that chap had a choice of either burning to death or jumping, and it just initiates that thought in people's heads. What was that poor chap going through?
It's incredibly upsetting. Isn't it?
It is. But you cannot.
We had a very long discussion about whether to use that picture or not.
Right.
We did in the end. We got a lot of stick for it.
I think everyone did, though, didn't they? The press at the time.
Yeah, I think they did, and I think in a situation like that, emotions were really raw anyway, weren't they? And there are lots of other pictures you look back. And
some of the images from that time were unbelievable, weren't they?
Yeah.
The people with like dust all over them, just running away from the towers and stuff.
Yeah. But they were apocalyptic, whereas that picture, particularly, didn't it? It just had this sort of solitary, and it's that.
You can imagine it happening.
It almost looks peaceful, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, in a way, because he's made his mind up.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's at peace with himself.
Decided.
Yeah.
Incredibly powerful image, and probably the right decision, I think, now to use it.
I think so too.
Yeah, at the time. But, that's a really interesting thing that happens in newsrooms, because, you will often send photographers to a car crash, and they'll come back with a picture in which you can see the body, or a body. We wouldn't have used that. But again, that comes down to then because we're not quite sure who that person is,
Yeah.
and because we were part of the community, you wouldn't want, you to find out that your sister and be killed in a car crash for the first time by seeing it on the front of the Herald. That would be
Absolutely
our
not.
worst
No.
nightmare
Yeah.
for both sides. So, sensitive use of horrendous pictures.
Must be such a difficult job just to be able to choose what to use, let alone take what to use as well.
It's a tough call.
Yeah.
But, when we used to have a lot of pictures, then we used to have a lot of brain power that go into making that call. Pete would come first and say, here are the pictures.
Yeah.
When I was news editing then, I'd say, oh, no, we're not using that. We use that. We'd discuss it. Then we'd go to a news conference, and we'd present the pictures we want to use to the editor. And he or she would go, oh, I don't know about that. Have you got anything else? Pete would go, oh, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you two ever fallen out about pictures in a meeting like that?
Yeah, but that's the joy of working with a good friend. You can have difference of opinion, and it is a healthy relationship, because you can, you're talking to somebody you work with every day, and they're going to make you're going to end up with a balanced result, and that's the whole point of having conference.
A good picture editor is essential, and a good picture editor relationship is essential.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Picture is worth 1,000 words, Robert.
Indeed.
He wouldn't admit that. He wouldn't admit that 20 years
At the time, you had to get out of him with a blood out of a stone. Yeah? I think we've run over what we would normally do, so we're going to call this a special when we put this out from now on. And I think probably we can do a second episode at some point or other. This has been really interesting, Pete. Thank you so much for coming along.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I think a round of applause from us chaps.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Pete Holdgate. And this has been Stop the Press.